as far as understanding of techniques is concerned, like I could walk you through every little step of how to do something and you could nail it. Like I could give you all the information you need, to make something work. But without any like understanding of principles, concepts, etc., what starts to happen is it becomes a very narrow window of a thing that you now understand. You basically just understand how to perform like one specific movement or subset of movements well. But without the concepts, principles, and all these other things, it will be very difficult for you, without your own in-depth study in these sorts of things, to take what you just learned and apply it elsewhere. That's what allows you to take a tiny piece of information. And I was talking about, you get a little bit from this person, a little bit from that person. That's what allows you to take a tiny piece of information and stretch it out like dough and turn it into a fucking pizza. I don't know. It's a terrible analogy.
I love pizza. It's fine. I love pizza. Yeah.
Came up with it off the cuff, whatever analogy you guys want to fucking use. All right. But you take something very, very small and now all of a sudden it can affect every part of your game or, subset of skills that you might have or whatever the case may be, because you understand some fundamental principle or concept behind whatever it is that you're doing that you can apply elsewhere. The other thing that's really awesome about that, aside from it changing all different parts of your game, another part of that is I think it helps deeply with memorization. Movements. There are so many movements in the sport, and you can break them down. If you said there was, and we're throwing random numbers out there, if you said there was 1,000 moves to the sport, then there would be 10,000 subsets of those 1,000 moves, micro movements or whatever the case may be. And then you could break it down even further than that, right? And, before you know it, I mean, you're just dealing with an inconceivable amount of information to really be able to use. And even with modern technology that we have now, it would be hard. Even if you had a cell phone, somehow you were able, inside your own mind, even if you had a cell phone inside your own mind and you were competing and you were able to do the same thing that we're all able to do on a day-to-day basis, which is like, for me, I say, okay, Google, and then my phone, thankfully my phone didn't respond to that, but, and then my phone, puts up a prompt and I could ask it any question in the world, or I type it in or whatever the case may be. For most people, it's probably, hey Siri, or Alexa or whatever the fuck, you're doing. If you could somehow install that in your brain, and I'm sure we're not far off from it, we're going to have, cybernet is definitely going to start taking over very soon. But even if you could do that, I don't think you would have the ability to summon up the information that you needed fast enough to respond in a live situation where somebody threw a problem at you. The only way you'd be able to do that is in some rare circumstances where you're held in a particular position and the other person is not progressing for a length of time. All right, if you can hold a given position for like 5 to 10 seconds, all right, maybe if you had Google installed in your brain, you'd be able to come up with a solution, quickly enough that you'd be able to use it. But unfortunately, like I said, we just don't have that time. Even if I could do that, even if you had every detail in the fucking world, the entire BJJ Fanatics library available to you at a thought, and not just at a not just at the touch of a button, it would be hard to summon up the ability to perform any of those things. Not just because you hadn't done them before, but also because of this. It would take you time to get what you were searching for. And I think what minimizes that amount of time and makes these things a little bit easier to understand is bridging the gap with these concepts and principles. Because now, if I can remember concepts and principles about a particular movement that apply in a broad stretch along a bunch of different techniques, well, now maybe it's 100 things that I got to remember instead of 1,000 or 10,000 or 1,000,000. And I can, on the fly, say, apply a concept to a given situation that I might not have ever even seen before. A problem that can, because that happens sometimes. It's rare, But that happens sometimes. You get into an exchange with somebody, whether it be an MMA or jiu-jitsu, and all of a sudden something happens, a reaction that just never happens in the gym. You never trained for, none of these things. And you're forced to try to come up with a solution. And if you have good, if you have a good handle on the concepts and principles of the sport, you're probably going to come up with a good educated answer. If you don't, and all you understand is like 4 moves that you're really, really good at, and you don't really, there isn't really a lot of in-depth knowledge associated with that, you're going to have a tough time responding in a situation that's a little less predictable. I know that didn't answer your question at all. I just went on a tangent about fucking concepts.
It's great, man. Yeah.
Because the real question that you're asking is, okay, that whole diatribe that I just went off of. Okay, well, what are some of those things? What are some of those really important things that you would communicate to, a newer student or whatever the case may be? Man, I hate to, steal somebody else's thunder here, but at the end of the day, like to some degree, that's what I'm always doing. Cause like I said, we're pulling, bits and pieces. Very few of the things that, that I'm going to come up with are truly organic. And even if they are, they were inspired by something else that somebody else told me or did to me or whatever the case may be. But I still believe to this day, the greatest conceptual understanding you could give to a brand new student is the 4-step system that John Danaher imparted upon the jiu-jitsu community. And it's something that anybody that was probably above a purple belt intrinsically understood just from being a part of the sport, but nobody had ever communicated to them. And they would have been a great benefit to have learned it much sooner, myself included. And that's that: take somebody down, get past their legs, pin them, look for an extended limb and submit. Man, as a newer student, if there's anything to understand and study, it's that very simple system. Because if no matter where you are for the most part in the sport, you can rely on that simple system to give you a decent sense of direction. Sure, as you get more advanced, it gets more complicated than that. And your decision trees are going to start to split in ways that, you wouldn't necessarily follow that exact system. But it's pretty goddamn good. It gives you a pretty goddamn good, clear picture of what we're trying to go after here, instead of what happens for most jiu-jitsu practitioners, even still to this day, because not everybody obviously is familiar with that information or being conveyed that information. They show up to jiu-jitsu class and what do they get? They get 5 puzzle pieces, if they're lucky. Some jiu-jitsu classes, maybe you get 2 or 3 puzzle pieces, and then it's like, all right, let's roll, baby. They don't even give a shit about teaching.
Yeah.
You get 3 puzzle pieces and no clear idea of where the fuck the puzzle pieces fit. You just got to put them in your pocket. You're like, oh yeah. Let me put those over there. I'm going to try to hold on to those. Make sure I don't lose them when my fucking pants get into the wash when I get home, and then, you get 3 more the next day and hopefully over time you're able to fucking connect all these dots and go, oh, this is what we're doing here. We're passing the legs, we're pinning people, or extending limbs and eventually looking to submit people. I think it's not like that information was like, oh man, and nobody knew that. It's funny because I'd seen John teach it at seminars and a lot of people would have a lot of trouble putting it together. But it's funny, man, not being able to communicate something doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have an understanding of it. I definitely think it means that you have a clearer understanding of it than another person. It's definitely helpful. The fewer words that you can communicate an idea, probably the better you're able to, the better grasp you have over the idea. But I think most people got it. But it's so much, and that's kind of what I'm saying in terms of in fewer words, being able to communicate an idea to people. Man, you just gave a simple 4-step system to somebody who knew nothing about, what we were doing. And now they have a pretty good fucking idea about what they're trying to do here, And I think that's really helpful and kind of conveys. And that's really what you're looking for as far as concepts are concerned. It's like, okay, how can I reduce this bulk of information into a smaller piece of information that's important for a lot of different things? And when you can do that, that's a reliable concept, principle, theory, however you want to attach yourself to that idea. I can give examples of other things. One of the things that John has communicated to me in mixed martial arts. This is another, concept, firepower advantage, used very well in World War II by the Germans. Okay. The Blitzkrieg. Okay. The idea of, basically putting everything you have attack wise at your opponent in a way that makes it very, very difficult for them to fire back because they're just receiving so much in the way of attack. Even if it's not perfectly accurate, even if it's not, even if it's not necessarily hitting, whatever the case may be, it's still bullets flying past your face, missiles flying past your face, explosions going off, whatever the case may be. And now under the cover of that fire, we can advance. Okay. And this is a concept that we used in mixed martial arts with high volume fighters. Okay. Boom, 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 boom. Where I'm throwing a bunch of punches in your face. They might not be very powerful. They might not be all landing perfectly. They're not going to necessarily be knockout shots, but it's hard for you to continue moving forward, especially if my head's moving when I'm doing that and trying to attack me when I'm putting all of this in your face. You know what I mean? I'm giving you something to occupy your vision. And this applies to jiu-jitsu too. And ironically, that's kind of my jiu-jitsu style is firepower advantage. My jiu-jitsu style very much is attack, 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 move, 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 move until you just can't fucking keep up and you can't come up with an answer anymore to the next movement that I'm going to throw at you. And it's a really cool thing because it's a really exciting style and it ends up playing out really well in front of a camera for people or in front of a crowd, so people can get really fucking excited about it. But it is that in and of itself was instilled in me by John through, sub principles of the sport. For example, a counter attack principle where, if I'm in a defensive situation, the best way to approach the defensive situation is with some form of offense, some sort of counter offense, however you want to look at it. Because if I approach a defensive situation from a defensive perspective and all I'm doing is defending the attack, then very likely you get back to a neutral situation. You could also call this the maximizing principle. Or maximizing mindset John would have, where it's like, hey man, we're not just satisfied with recovering from the bad position. We're satisfied with defending the position while putting the opponent under threat. So now it's my turn to attack again, That's just one principle that leads into firepower advantage. It's hard to have firepower advantage if you're the one defending, if you're the one covering up, right? You can't really do that. So that's an example into, there's just so many, it's really hard for me to say, specifically, exactly, what a beginner needs in terms of principles. But I do think that 4-step system is that's a great one. I don't know if you want to refer to that as a principle theory or, strategy, whatever the case may be, however you want to look at that. But I think that's like the most helpful thing I could say, for a newer student.